Good evening, and welcome to this week's edition of The Message. I'm your host, Donatus King, and we'll spend this next hour with one purpose in mind, and that one purpose is delivering the message that God is Almighty. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be, is a piece of God. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be, was made by God. Everything that ever happened is happening right now or ever will happen was made to happen by God. God is a master plan for all time and all creation. God is Almighty. The message is brought to you by, is produced by the Society of Knowledge Incorporated. The Society is an interdenominational ministry. Our members come from various different religious and spiritual backgrounds. We have various different religious and spiritual beliefs. Although we come from different backgrounds and they have different beliefs, there's one belief that we share. There's one piece of knowledge that we hold in common, and that's the knowledge that there is a being. By no matter what name we may have been taught to call that being, by no matter what name we may have come to know that being, whether that name be God, Allah, Yahweh, Jesus, Jehovah, Buddha, nature, by no matter what name, we know that there is a being that possesses not some of the power, not most of the power, but all of the power. We know that there's a being that personally I call God that possesses all of the power that is indeed Almighty. That's the reason we do this show, and the only reason we do this show, to deliver that message that God is indeed Almighty. Today is January the 16th. That's right, this month is more than halfway over. January the 16th, 2020. And I remind you of that fact because tonight, as we are on most Thursdays, we are live. And I remind you of that fact because this show is an open discussion, it's a two-way conversation. For those of you that are watching by Facebook, I invite you to join the discussion by posting your comments on Facebook, and I'll do my best to read those comments out over the air. For those of you that are watching by television, I invite you to join the discussion by calling in, and you see the telephone number that's on your screen, and that's 504-483-3336. Call in and join the discussion. If there's something that's going on in your church, your synagogue, your mosque, your masjid, your temple, your place of worship, and you want to let the world know about it, call in and let the world know about it. If there's something that's going on in your nonprofit organization and you want to let the world know about it, call in and let the world know about it. Post your comment on Facebook. More important than what's going on in your place of worship, more important than what's going on in your nonprofit organization, if there's something that God has done for you in your life, a miracle that God has worked in your life, and I use that word literally, a miracle, because the God that I'm here to tell you about is working miracles today. That's right, January the 16th, 2020, the God I'm here to tell you about is working miracles. So if God has worked a miracle in your life, post your testimony on Facebook or call in and share your testimony. You know, it may be someone that's watching this show right now, or someone that'll watch it on Facebook later on, or go to our website later on, to our YouTube page and watch it. Someone that might be in need of a miracle. Hearing your testimony about how God worked a miracle in your life, it might be the one thing that they need that will strengthen them, encourage them, help them to hold on until God works a miracle in their life. So post your comments on Facebook. Brother Terry, thank you for joining us on Facebook. And call in and share your testimony. All right, I'm going to get into our topics tonight. Let's go right into our show. And we have some slides that we'll start off with, as usual. All right, so we just finished. That's our acknowledgement, acknowledging that God is Almighty. As I said, today is January the 16th. We'll have our announcements. Then we'll have our testimonies, as I encouraged everyone. If you have a testimony, call in and share your testimony. After that, we'll have our religious spiritual study. And I remind myself, and I remind all of us, as Thessalonians instructs us, to prove all things, hold fast that which is good. If you hear me say something on the show, or if you hear someone to call in and say something on the show, or post something on Facebook, and it's not quite right, let us know. Okay, let us know. We want to give out only correct information, and don't take our word for anything that we say here. Check it out yourself. You know, Thessalonians says, prove all things, so check it out yourself, and hold fast that which is good. Tonight's spiritual religious discussion, we'll talk about the Dogon. Okay, the Dogon people. Some of you may know who they are, what that is. Some of you may not, but that's our topic tonight, the Dogon. Pretty interesting. Words of inspiration will come out of the book of Exodus, starting in chapter 9, verse 15, and we'll see just how far we get tonight. Announcements. There's our main website that you see on the screen now, and that's www.godisalmighty.org. That's our main website. I encourage you, I invite you to lock that into your web browser, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can visit that website, and there are links to all of our social media platforms. We have a blog, we have a Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You don't have to worry about all those addresses to those social media outlets. Just lock in our main website, and when you go to that main website, they have links. You could just click a little button on the main website. It'll take you to our blog, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all of our social media outlets. Sister Rashida, thank you for joining us, Sister Rashida, on Facebook. Blessings to you, sister. All right, our Rock of Ages Ministries International, Apostle Ronnie Bailey. That's his main website, or their main website, rather. And it's www.ronniebailey.com. I invite you to check out their website. A lot of good things on their website. New Orleans Peacekeepers. Here in the city of New Orleans, that area, that number is 504-500-1706. We hear a lot of violence going on in our city. I think somebody was just shot last night in the city of New Orleans. You know, if you know people that are having disputes out here, you know, in the neighborhoods, call the peacekeepers. The peacekeepers, they're not police. They're just private individuals that come out and they'll sit down and help people talk things out. Instead of picking up a pistol, sit down and talk things out. And everything is kept confidential. Okay, so that's the peacekeepers. You know, give them a call. Instead of picking up a pistol, give them a call. In the New Orleans area, it's supposed to get real cold this weekend. People be firing up those space heaters and doing other things to try to keep warm. You know, fire hazard. So if you're in the New Orleans area, you can call 311 between the hours of 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. for free smoke detectors. Okay, just give them a call. Please check your vehicle's back seat for babies. It's been a blessing. I haven't heard in the past couple of weeks of any children losing their lives being left in the back seats, but we know that happens too frequently. You know, and it's something that is avoidable. So check your vehicle's back. Get in the habit. Get in the habit of checking your back seat for babies, just to make sure that such an accident does not occur. 2020 is census has jobs. You can apply online, and there's the phone number there. You see 1-855-562-2020, or you can go to their website, and that's 2020census.gov. And they have jobs that are available there. Hey, make sure that we keep it up here. All right. Founders Day brunch. The historic St. James AMEC, and that's actually African Methodist Episcopal Church, will have a Founders Day brunch. That'll be they'll have music, art. There'll be a buffet, plates, fashion, jewelry, home and self-care products. That'll be Sunday, February the 16th. So, you know, we have about a month, but, you know, start planning now to go out and support the historic St. James AME Church. That's Sunday, February the 16th from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m., and that's located at 222 North Roman Street here in the city of New Orleans. Religious spiritual study, again, hold fast that which is good. Coming out of First Book Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21. But before we go there, this is an announcement. I didn't have a chance to print it up to put it on the screen. But last week we talked about, and I'm going to, for those of you that are watching by Facebook, I'm getting ready to come, so we can take this off, so I can make a direct appeal to our Facebook watchers. Last week we had a gentleman on the program, Brother Edward Reed Roberts, who is a licensed clinical social worker, and he was discussing with us a problem, and it is a problem that's being experienced by some of our caregivers, we had responses to that program from throughout the city and even from as far away as Los Angeles, California. Folks watched the show and responded to it. So it's a problem that's not isolated here just in New Orleans. And that's a problem when I speak about caregivers. We're at the point now where, Brother Tony, we're at the point now where folks are living longer, and a lot of our parents and grandparents are living to be in their 80s, 90s, 100. And it gets to a point whereas a number of them, their spouses have died. Children may all be dead. Any children that are surviving or any relatives may wind up becoming what we call caregivers. And a lot of times it starts out not somebody saying, well, I'm going to have you to be my caregiver, but it turns out that over a period of years, it may be a mother that's alive, and it might be just one child that still lives in the city, and it'll start out that child is the one that goes by the mother's house, every week. Then as things progress, the child will go by the mother's house every day. Then we'll start doing shopping for the mother and cleaning up for the mother and things such as that. And the next thing you know, that child is the caregiver. And that's the way it happens. It happened to me like that with my grandmother. My grandmother lived to be 100 years old. And over the course of time, that's exactly the way it happened. That I wound up being her caregiver. And it got to the point whereas she was by herself, and it was my responsibility to take care of it, check on her, make sure that she had her meals. My wife helped me out doing that, and that was great. Brother Bernard, thank you. Brother Waters, thank you for joining us on Facebook. And as I was saying, it became my responsibility, and when I say my responsibility, that I say it's a blessing that God gave me to be there for her. And eventually, she wasn't able to stay in a home by herself. I had to hire sitters to be with her 24/7, and eventually got to the point where she had to be placed in assisted living, not assisted living, in a nursing home actually. But going through that, there were a number of things that I experienced personally, mentally, physically, emotionally. And so that's the conversation that we had last week on the air here with our guest. And as I say, we had responses from across the country to that. So, and there was some real touching responses. One lady commented that she thought she was the only one that was having those kind of feelings about taking care of her loved one. The only one that was going through those changes, mentally going through those changes. Mentally going through those changes when she had to make decisions as to what to do with their loved ones in that caregiving process. So I'm saying all that. If you or someone you know is dealing with that issue right now, give me a call, and you could call me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's my office number that's on the screen right now. That's 504-821-3221. Or you can post your comment, contact me through Facebook and let me know if you're interested in joining a support group And this is something that's free. There's no charge for that. But joining a support group so that you'll be able to be around others and interact and talk to others that are going through the same thing. You know, and sometimes it does all the good in the world just to be able to talk and get this off your chest. Just like the young lady that made the comment on Facebook last week that she just felt so good being able to know that other folks were going through this and that she wasn't the only one having these kind of issues and thoughts to deal with. So if you're interested in joining that support group, give me a call, and I will make sure that you get in contact with Brother Edward Reed Roberts so that we can get that support group going. We don't have to take and just be isolated. Okay, this is something that folks are dealing with, so you don't have to be isolated. There is some help out there. All right, let's see if we can move on. I think we have a couple more announcements. And then, actually, we're ready to get into our discussion about the Dogon. All right, make sure I'm catching up here. All right, okay, that's the Dogon. All right, that carving that you see, if you can make it out, it looks like on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see two figures, and one of them looks, if you look at it, looks like it has a fish that's standing up with scales. And then on the other side, you'll see just one figure standing, and that looks like a fish. And that looks like, with scales. You can see the scales and the fish head, the fish eyes, and the mouth. All right, so the Dogon. Now, what does that have to do with anything, the fish? Well, let's look at it and see. All right. All right. I'm going to read now. Everything that I'm reading now, not everything, but most of what I'm reading now has come off the internet. It's come off of Wikipedia. Okay, the Dogon are an ethnic group living in the central plateau of Mali, West Africa. And I always like to put these maps up so people could see. You talk about Africa and you talk about Mali. If you don't really have a map up there, you're not going to know where that is. So we see the continent of Africa, and Africa is indeed a continent. It's not a country, it's a continent, and there are many different countries on the continent of Africa, and one of those countries is Mali. And as you see on your screen now, that Mali, towards the west coast of Africa. Okay, according to anthropologists, the Dogon people had a system of signs which ran into the thousands, including their own systems of astronomy and calendrical measurements, methods of calculation, and extensive anatomical and physiological knowledge, as well as a systematic pharmacopoeia. Now, I'm going to stop there for a minute, because right now we think that our civilization on planet Earth, we think that is very advanced. Okay? But when we look at the technological advances that we're enjoying, technological advances like the TV and the computer, the internet, and cars and planes. When we look at those technological advances, really, when we start tracing it back, it's really only over a period of maybe 400 years, 500 years, maybe 500 years. Hey, I don't know what year the steam engine was invented. But I know it's the technology that we're enjoying now really can't be traced back further than 500 years. But when we look at science, and science tells us that man, as we know man, and I'm not talking about, Cro-Magnon and all the rest of that, I'm just talking about man, has been around for thousands of years. For thousands of years. And just looking at things like the Bible, relying upon things like the Bible and other works like the Egyptian Book of the Dead and other spiritual and religious texts, we know that man has been around for at least 4,000 or 5,000 years. So if we've made this kind of advance in technology in the past 500 years, what was man doing for those other 4,000 years? What knowledge had man amassed during those 4,000 years? What knowledge had man amassed and now we've lost? So when we read about the Dogon, when we read about, thank you, Bishop Wendy Mee, thank you for that information on Facebook. When we read about the Dogon and it's saying that they had their own system of astronomy and measurements and calculations, when we look at the pyramids and we read about the Egyptians and how precise the construction of the pyramids were and the type of mathematics and calculations that were needed to construct the pyramids, and what type of mechanics or what type of system was used to place those multi-ton blocks of stone in place to make the pyramids. It makes me wonder, what kind of knowledge did man possess at one point in time where we didn't need these mechanical tools such as cranes to lift stone blocks, where we didn't need an operating room full of surgical equipment to perform surgeries. We didn't need manufactured drugs to cure our bodies. We didn't need multi-million-dollar telescopes to study the planets and identify the planets and observe how they move through the sky. How much knowledge have we lost? So when I read about the Dogons, I'm not surprised. Now there are some folks now that are kind of doubting whether the Dogon actually did the things that are said. But let me move on a little bit. Let me move on. All right there, Bishop Mee, the book of the coming forth of day and night. It's a whole lot of information out there. But let me move on. Let me move on and all right. See if we can cover just a little bit more of this. All right. The key spiritual figures in the religion of the Dogon were the Numo/Nomo twins. The Numo, also referred to as the serpent, were amphibians that were often compared to serpents, lizards, chameleons, and occasionally even sloths because of their being slow-moving and having a shapeless neck. They were also described as fish capable of walking on land. While they were on land, the pneumo stood upright on their tails. The pneumo's skin was primarily green, but like the chameleon, it sometimes changed colors. Now I'm going to stop here for a minute, and I'm going to stop here for a minute because I want to talk a little bit about science. Okay? I want to talk just a little bit about science. Sister Sam, thank you for joining us on Facebook. And I said I want to talk a little bit about science because as I was reading this just now, and I've been working on this, preparing for tonight, but the Spirit didn't reveal this to me until just the second when I was reading this. Okay. I remember in science, and I remember reading about what they call evolution. And what I remember reading about evolution, and this is in my science class, okay? Not science fiction. This is science. What I remember reading about evolution is it talks about, you know what, when I'm talking about science, a lot of times what you read in the science books, when you look at it, you see some real similar stuff in our religious books, like the Bible. See, so science talks about the earth when it was first formed. It was like a ball of gases. And then that gases began to cool down and come together and form a solid. And then that solid, there was precipitation on that solid. You know, there's a liquid. And that kind of sounds like what the Bible is talking about, you know, when God first formed the earth. Right? And then the heavens and the seas and all the rest of that. But then science says that this mass, when it started cooling down, it was covered with they called, and I remember I remember this phrase, a primordial sea. Primordial sea. Okay? It wasn't an ocean. It was a primordial sea, this liquid that covered. And then the science that I remember, it says about some of these chemicals in that primordial sea began to interact with each other. And that interaction over eons, that interaction resulted in flesh. And when I say flesh, it started out as little single-cell animals. Single-cell animals floating around in that primordial sea. And then after thousands and thousands, millions of years, that life form became more complex. And cut a long story short, science says that after a while, these life forms start being like little fishes and stuff swimming around in that sea. And then science teaches that after a while, those life forms that were swimming around in the sea came on land. And that's how mammals and animals develop. That's what science teaches. And I tell you the craziest thing, when I'm reading here now and they talk about the dogons and the pneumo and how they came out the water and started walking around, they got stuff to do that nowadays. If you haven't seen, watch the Nature Channel sometimes. Brother Percy, thank you for joining us. Pastor, Sister Claudette, thank you for joining us on Facebook. If you watch, sometimes I like watching Discovery Channel and all the rest of that. When you watch that, you see nowadays, that they have fish, and some of them are catfish, that will actually come up out the water and walk around on the land. They do. They fins, and they just be walking around. And I think even seen some that climbing a tree. And then after a while, they go walk back and go back in the water. And I'm not talking about alligators, nothing else like that. I'm talking about fish. Okay? But anyway, when you start thinking about that, and I'm glad I said the alligators, because the alligators, they be swimming around in the water. They go underneath there and stay underneath there for hours, and then come back up and walk on the land and go back in the water. So when you start thinking about stuff like that, it's really not so hard to believe what the Dogon's talking about with these pneumos. But now here's where the kicker comes in. Here's where the kicker comes in. Now that's a little bit something about the Domos. All right, yeah, Bishop Meade. That's what they call the Book of the Dead. You're right. I had forgot that, Bishop. You're absolutely correct. Let me move on, because I get to talking about this stuff and get kind of excited about it. All right. The Dogons are renowned for their knowledge. All right. For their knowledge about the Sirius system, which dates back to 3200 BC, long before scientists discovered it in 1862. According to them, the Sirius A, which is the brightest star in the Earth's night sky, had a much dimmer companion, Sirius B, which has a 50-year elliptical orbit around the bright Sirius A and is extremely dense. From oral tradition, the Dogon confirmed their affiliation with extraterrestrial bodies which visited Earth some years ago. And I'm going to pause again just to comment on that. And when we talk about the Dogons and their, let's see if I can come out of this. All right. When we talk about the Dogons and their knowledge about the stars and about the planets, this is before, we're talking about 3200 BC. So this is 5,000 years ago, before they had all of these observatories with $1 million telescopes and computers to try to plot out and identify these stars that are out there. Now, one of the things that I'm not reading tonight, and that's a piece of information, whereas the Dogons, when they speak about the pneumos, they speak that these were life forces that actually originated on another planet and visited the Earth and began a population here on the Earth. A life form that existed on another planet. Now again, it might sound a little bit far-fetched, and I'm not trying to say it's true or not. It might sound a little far-fetched, but when we come to science, and science teaches us about meteors that strike the Earth, science teaches us about space dust that's been out all throughout the galaxies and it lands here on the Earth. Now there's no telling what kind of microbes, what kind of life forms, organisms are in that space dust or on those meteors. No telling. So it doesn't sound so far-fetched. When we just think about science, and maybe, just maybe, some of the things that we're reading about in some of these religious works are really just a retelling of knowledge that was amassed, that was acquired by ancient scientists. Okay, so nothing fantastical or anything else like that. Just a retelling of knowledge that was possessed, and now it may be obscured. All right. Sister Suzanne, thank you for joining us on Facebook. And let me see how we're doing with the time. We're starting to get a little bit short on time, so let me move on a little bit here. Okay. All right. So that's the what we're looking at the screen now. And if you look at Sirius, they call Sirius the dog star, and they call it that because, as you see on your screen now, that's the constellation. And you see it says Canis Major. And Canis, we know that Canis, the canine, the dog. And if you look, you can kind of see the outline of a dog at the bottom, those two extensions at the bottom, the dog's hind legs. Up at the top where you see that star Sirius, that bright star, okay, that's up by the dog's chest. That line coming down from that, that's the dog's front leg. And then you see that triangle up at the top, that's the dog's head. So if you want to just go look out in the sky and look at some constellations, that's the constellation of Canis Major. And there is the star Sirius. And they say it's one of the brightest stars in the night sky. All right, let's see. Move on a little bit here. Now it's interesting. As a matter of fact, there was a little bit about that. From oral tradition, the Dogon confirmed their affiliation with extraterrestrial bodies which visited Earth some years ago. According to them, ugly amphibious beings in the form of mermaids and mermen from the Sirius system, known as Nomos, visited Earth. The Nomos lived on a planet that rotated around other stars in the Sirius system. All right, now what you see on your screen now, those are Babylonian Momos. So we've read about the Nomos with the Dogons in West Africa, but now here the Nomos we see also appear in Babylonian, Akkadian, and Sumerian myths. And as you all know, Babylon and Akkadia and Sumer, those are located over on Asia, the Asian continent, right? So that's on the other side of the east of Africa. So it's something that's not just isolated to West Africa, but we see that they have these appear also in other parts of the world. And as you see on your screen, that's coming out of the how they depicted in Babylon. Right? And not only those Nomos, but as you see on your screen now, the Egyptian goddess Isis is also sometimes depicted as a mermaid, and she is also linked with the star Sirius. Apostle Bailey, thank you for joining, Apostle. All right. So the Dogon recount that the Nomos, after descending on Earth in an ark-like structure, gave them information about the Sirius system and the Earth's solar system. Okay. Now, again, I'm not here trying to convince anybody about the existence of the Nomos or the existence of any of that. I'm not trying to convince anybody about the beliefs of the Dogon. Here, just sharing some information, and it's fantastic. Now, just sit back for a minute now. As fantastic as all of that might sound, as unbelievable as all of that might sound, just think about some of the stuff that a lot of us believe. Okay? Just think about some of the stuff that a lot of us believe. Okay? A lot of us believe that there was a man that could walk on water. A lot of us believe that there were angels that came to earth And the people in the town that they visited wanted to rape them. And because they wanted to rape them, the angels whipped up some fire and brimstone from heaven and killed all them people. You know, sometimes there's some stuff that's hard to believe. And those of you that read your Bible or that stayed awoke while the pastor was talking about that, you know that that's what I'm talking about now is the story about Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah. How the two angels visited, and the people up in there wanted to rape them angels. And Lot interceded. Then there also it talks about Lot's wife turned around and looked to see what's going on, and she got turned into a pillar of salt. That's kind of hard to believe. How you just going to be 1 second you were moving around, and then the next second, just because you turned your head to look, you turned into a pillar of salt? That's kind of hard to believe. Yeah? So I'm saying all that. Sometimes keeping an open mind when we're reading about the Dogons, when we're reading about the Egyptians, when we're reading about whatever it is that we're reading about, you know, keeping an open mind. All right. Sister Carolyn, thank you. Sister Rochella, thank you for joining us on Facebook. All right. We're going to move on now, and we're going to go into our words of inspiration coming out of the book of Exodus, starting at chapter 9, verses 15 to 35. And before I do that, I want to encourage all of you to please go. Those of you that are watching by Facebook, look on my page. Go to my page and click on one of the pages that are linked to mine, and that's the page for the Messenger. Okay, go to that page. And actually, I have on my page, I shared a post, and the post that I shared was a post coming out of our Lafayette Center. Hey, we have a center in, as most of you know, we have a Society of Knowledge, a center in North Carolina. We have one here in New Orleans, and we have one in Lafayette. The one in Lafayette, they did a broadcast just past Tuesday, and it was the inaugural message being delivered by Messenger Corey Levier. And Messenger Levier, his ordination was acknowledged back at the beginning of last month. It actually occurred during the 40th anniversary celebration of the Society of Knowledge. But this past Tuesday, Messenger Corey delivered his first message. And the title of it was Reason. A reason, R-E-S-O, a reason. Okay? And the reason for things occurring. And the reason coming back that God has a master plan for all time and all creation. Okay? A master plan. Now, the way that fits in with tonight's discussion, we're getting ready to read some scriptures. And the scriptures we're going to read, we have been reading for the past couple of weeks. We have been reading about the book of Exodus and some things that God was doing as far as having Moses go talk to Pharaoh. And then we would read where God would harden Pharaoh's heart and cause a whole lot of problems for Moses and the Hebrews. So now look at this, is interesting. Let's get into this. Okay, book of Exodus chapter 9 verse 15. Look what it said. For now I will stretch out my hand that I may smite thee and thy people with pestilence, and thou shalt be cut off from the earth. And in very deed, for this cause have I raised thee up for to show in thee my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the earth. Now this is God Almighty that's speaking. Okay? God Almighty. Now as I keep that up on the screen, I'm going back and I'm looking, and if you look in chapter 9, if you look up in chapter 9, this is God giving Moses the words to tell Pharaoh, and this is God saying, this is something else here. Look what God is saying, that he's going to smite Pharaoh and his people with pestilence. And look, the kicker in this, man, this is the piece right there. Let's just focus on this. Look at that verse 16. And in very deed for this cause have I raised thee up. God is telling Pharaoh, look, Pharaoh, that's the reason I created you. I created you so that you will go through this. And I want you to go through this because what? For to show in thee my power. See, I want to demonstrate to the whole wide world just how powerful I am. You see, Pharaoh, you and your people, the other Egyptians, have been worshiping your gods, but now I'm the God of Abraham, and I have more power than the God you've been worshiping. And in order to show you that I have more power, I've been putting you through all these changes. And I've been putting you through these changes. Look what it says right at the end of that verse. And that my name may be declared throughout all the earth. So that my name, see, God had a plan. See, there was a reason. There was a reason for Pharaoh going through this. There was a reason. Now let's get real about this. There was a reason for there to have been a drought on the face of the earth. There was a reason for it. And the reason for that was so that the Hebrew people would leave out of the land of Canaan and go into Egypt, where the storehouses were full of grain. There was a reason for that. God has a master plan for all time and all creation. There was a reason for Joseph being placed over all of Egypt, being only second in power to Pharaoh himself. There was a reason for that. There was a reason for Moses being placed in that little bitty boat made out of reeds and being saved by the daughter of Pharaoh. There was a reason for it. There was a reason for Moses, the Hebrew boy that was raised as an Egyptian prince. There was a reason for him slaying that Egyptian and fleeing out into the wilderness. There was a reason for it. There was a reason for Moses coming back to Egypt and telling Pharaoh to let my people go. There was a reason for it. And what we are reading tonight, we're reading tonight that God says that, yes, I had this all planned out. All of it planned out. Even the birth and raising up of Pharaoh, I had all that planned out. And all that was planned out so that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. And understand something. Here it is, we're 4,000 years later, at least 4,000 years later. And what are we doing? We are still declaring that God is almighty. See, God's got a plan. A very complex, complicated plan. A plan that misses no details. You see, as Messenger Corey was speaking about a reason, yes, there's a reason for everything. The reason being that God is almighty. That's the reason that God's got a master plan. Everybody's going to work together, whether we realize it or not. Everybody's going to work together, just like Moses and Pharaoh were working together, even though they didn't realize it. Everybody's going to work together to carry out God's master plan. You see, it's not going to be any mishaps. You know, sometimes when I'm planning out this show, there are some glitches. There might be some little technical difficulties. Okay, last week we had some audio difficulties. Sometimes it might be some video difficulties. The plan that I have planned out for the show doesn't work out sometimes. But understand, the God I'm here to tell you about has a plan that works out every time. See, there's not going to be any power failure. There's not going to be any of that. Things are going to go exactly the way God planned. And that, knowing that, gives me peace. It gives me peace because I don't have to worry. Oh, wait a minute now. I don't have to worry about what's going to happen to me tomorrow. I don't have to worry about what's going to happen to me next year. I don't have to worry about what's going to happen to me after I die. See, I've said this before. I ain't worried about going to heaven or hell. I ain't worried about none of that because I know God has it planned out exactly where I'm going to be, and I know that I am going to be exactly where God wants me to be when God wants me to be there. That gives me peace. Gives me peace. You see, I'm not depending upon myself because I know that I'm only human. I know that I have a whole lot of stuff that I don't know. I know that sometimes I'm going to go left when really I thought I should have gone right. I know that. I know that being a human and being judged by human standards, that I'm going to fall short, that I'm not perfect. I know that. I know that there's sometimes things that I'm going to do is going to disappoint some people. I know that. I know that sometimes the things that I'm going to do are going to disappoint myself. I know that. But one thing that I do know, ain't nothing I'm ever going to do going to disappoint God because God made me and God is guiding me, God controlling me in every step of my life is ordered. Just like old Pharaoh. God said, I raised you up for this. I raised you up for this, and I raised you up for this, so that what? To show in thee my power, to let the world see that I am indeed almighty, to let the world see that I could bring the frogs up to take over the land, to let the world see that I could turn the water into blood, to let the world see that I could throw the dust up in the air and let it fall down and cover everybody and everything with boils. To let the world see. And look here, people. More than 4,000 years later, the world is still seeing, still proclaiming. So I just discussed this with your sister Ruth. Thank you for joining us on Facebook. I just discussed this with you. I'm praying. I'm praying that God blesses you with peace. Blesses you with knowing that you are indeed in God's hand. And when the world has turned its back on you, even when you might start turning your back on yourself, and yes, folks do that. Understand what I'm saying now? This is real. Folks do get to the point sometimes where they turn their back on themselves. Listen to what I'm saying. I was looking at TV just the other day, and they were talking about some teenagers. And they were talking about a young girl in high school, how she was cyberbullied. You know, she got into a little humbug at school, and then the other teenagers start going on the internet, social media, and talking about it, all the rest of that kind of stuff. And every time they showed her, she'd be sitting there in her phone, be going bing, 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 getting messages. And that's the mother children just picking on her, talking bad about her, calling all kind of names. And then it got to the point where she turned her back on herself. Understand what I'm saying? Turned her back on herself. She got to the point where when I say turn her back on herself, you know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about she took her own life. She killed herself. She couldn't deal with it. Let me just share as I close. There's a peace that can be found. And I'm not saying this because somebody told me. I'm not saying it because I read it in the book. I'm saying it because I know it personally. There's a peace that can be found in knowing that God is in control. That God is in charge. That God is indeed almighty. In this upcoming week, no matter whatever it is that you have to go through, if you got to be like Pharaoh, you got to go through some stuff. If you got to be like the Hebrews, you got to go through some stuff. No matter whatever it is that you have to go through in this upcoming week, please know in my prayers that God blesses you with knowing that God is indeed almighty and God can pull you through. May Almighty God in this upcoming week bless you and yours with peace.